Now what do we have to do? And that leads us to the next level, which apparently is snowboarding down a giant hill and shooting down this guy's backup. Oh, and he's throwing grenades at us. So just kind of a, you know, another day on the job. I think we're in the cockpit or something. One part of the last boss. It's like our trophy almost. And there's rocket ninjas on snowboard jetpacks. You know, sure. Looks like they have swords of some kind as well. This would be one of those points where because we're not only fighting against these enemies but also the terrain itself, having the SMG's spray is very helpful. If we were using the double laser for this, we'd basically be, because the hill is kind of grading up and down rapidly, we'd be hitting snow a lot, which sucks. Oh, all these guys are gonna throw a bunch of rockets at us. Luckily we get these like nice red cues that are like, hey, get out of this spot. And they kind of guide the player along which ways to go. Oh, and if you just saw in the background, there's now a dragon that has apparently been missiled in. And as long as we shoot it a whole bunch of... Oh! It has a couple different moves that it makes. Looks like it does two of those arc patterns where we kind of have to move out of the way of wherever it's going to show up. And then it'll do one, like, quick stab where... Oh, nope, that one just did it in one. That's... Okay. Not even fair. Anyway, I should get back to critiquing the game. After, in our last little bit before the boss happened, we looked at the primary system of the game, which is gravity. The main theme explores how gravity works in a lot of weird ways. Sometimes snakes explode and hit you on the way down to do a little bit of damage. Oh, I don't know if we're going to be able to survive this. Not in one go. Ah, and it's another grenade paratrooper. Great. So how gravity is used in Intrusion 2, it creates a very cool form of expression. And so my next question is, how does gravity make me feel in the game? And in a word, it makes me feel alive. And I think that's a really beautiful thing, that a game can make you feel alive. But I kind of have to explain some of these forces at work to how they all combine to create this feeling of vitality. And so there's a lot of forces. The first one being a force of insignificance. So I mean, we don't get killed on the first hit, but the enemies fire a lot more bullets than I can fire, and there are a lot more of them than there are of me. Not only that, but they are commonly also larger than I am. Sometimes they can fly or have katana swords and rocket launchers, sometimes all at the same time. And so they have this is a pretty big advantage over just little old me and my red scarf. And so the insignificance of my own existence within this world, when combined with all of these other forces, end up kind of empowering me into fighting against all odds. And the way the game constantly escalates that pressure in a very Csikszentmihalyi game flow kind of way allows me to continue growing in my own abilities while making me feel like a small piece of a much bigger puzzle. Also, I feel like I totally butchered up that Csikszentmihalyi name. I always do. Anyway, The second force after this... Actually, I want to get back to the force of insignificance. It's kind of a cool thing, because it's part of also how we learn how to play the game, is in a lot of these cases you have to die a whole bunch of times to figure out what are the best ways to do it. And so that's part of what grows into making you feel, oh, there's fish now, what make you feel insignificant. Anyway, so to move on, the second force that I have is a force of machines. And this game is full of robots and androids and all sorts of these kinds of things. And to the point to where humans represent the slabbies. They get shot a few times and fall over. They're fodder. Compared to the robots, however, robots are the big time. They are bigger and stronger than you are, and this feeds into the previous force. On top of that, they're machines, which means they're complex beings that don't necessarily subscribe to forces like gravity or explosions or anything else in the same way that I do. Look at that, how he died there. But yeah, machines are beyond the forces of gravity or some of these other things. They don't die when you throw rocks on their heads. So they're almost, in a game as limited as Intrusion is, they're pretty much the gods of the game. And so there's also this thematic part where robotic forces represent a distant and unfeeling enemy emotionally. And this is especially shown when multiple large robots are on screen at the same time. It's supposed to be this huge threat. It's like, oh no, all of these robots that we've been fighting, they were hard one-on-one. Now they're on screen together, and I have to fight two of them. Oh, this is the worst thing ever. But then when they're on screen together, they actually start tripping over each other. And things get sloppy, and you start to see the cracks in the robotic armor that is artificial intelligence. It's hilarious and beautiful, and this idea of like an emotionless, unfeeling robot is most apparent when those robots screw up together. If they had more complex like webs of ideas that they could work off of, they probably, wouldn't trip over each other the same way. The humans don't have that problem in this game, especially with how they work. But they have other little problems, like this. They definitely like walking into fire. They realize they're on fire, they're like, oh, this is a terrible thing! Why did I think this would be awesome? Yeah, the propane tanks are really, really strange. You shoot them a couple times, there'll be a pillar of fire that goes upwards for really forever. It lasts for a long time. If not, I think it doesn't end. I may be wrong though. But yeah, it's a goofy thing. And then when you shoot it more, it'll make this large explosion, which can also hurt yourself. So it's something to be very careful with, because it can hurt you just as much as it hurts anyone else. So on the flip side, these machines that are in the game, they become like a foil to me, the player character. Since I am but a small human with little puny guns, yet with courage and patience and timing mostly, I can actually take down these large colossi, despite that they're an incredibly intimidating force. So the third force that we can talk about, and it's very apt within this level especially, is these beasts of nature. They are a major force within the game. Conversely against the robots, we can't actually kill any of the living creatures in the game. The wolves, the fish, I think that's most of all of them. Uh-oh. Here's a robot! We can't actually, kill them in any way, and so the other primary law of nature within this game is that when I shoot things, they die. And they go against that very basic law. And so, when we talk about the law of gravity, it's not only mechanical, but it also becomes very natural, especially with these characters in the game. Gravity is a pseudo-constant that can be robotically applied in mathematics, but it's also a differentiating force. When you think about gravity itself as a force, it separates plants from animals in a very fundamental way. Francis Halley wrote something about, if I can remember it right, abstracting the primordial ooze in a way that all life came from and early on. And so the way that he wrote it was that you have plants who decided to grow vertically against nature by rooting themselves, then taking energy from their surroundings and growing a thick cell wall. All of these and many more pieces combine to become an organism that, instead of going outwards perpendicular to gravity, it grows up directly against gravity. And so it naturally had to figure out ways to make that work for itself. And in that way it becomes trees mostly. Trees, plants, bushes, even like sea plants have their own special ways because they work against gravity in a very different way, which allows them to take in nutrients in a radically different sort of feeling. On the opposite end, you have animals who choose to grow horizontally or perpendicular of gravity in a totally different way. And so they gain energy through mobility. And point is, nature is separated by how it relates to gravity, and so Intrusion 2 combines robots, nature, and gravity all at once. And so first we have like little armadillo robots, and then we have real live wolves, and we get mechs with rockets, swords, and other grapple hooks, and then we have squid robots and jet planes that kind of look like bears. And then finally, it'll all climax with these laser jaguars that flip long knife tails and leap at you. And so all of these forces combine to create a feeling of these natural energies, natural processes that kind of feed back into the main themes of the game. And I think that's just a really important thing to take note of when you're playing a game like Intrusion 2, that it has a very distinct point with how it uses nature. Especially when it's supposed to be kind of parodying this like Metal Gear idea where it's infiltrating an enemy base in sub-frozen Alaska or something like that. Alaska or Russia or one of those kinds of, it's a very icy place. It should be, for all intents and purposes, dead. But then it's not, so how do those design decisions get made? Anyway, so for the fourth force that plays into this big idea of how does gravity make me feel alive, the fourth force, which I've kind of alluded to, is mobility itself. And we have two primary ways of manipulating our position in space. One is with moving our bodies. WASD lets us jump, duck, and move away from danger or move towards danger, however we want to position ourselves. Sometimes we can... The other primary way, before I get too ahead of myself, is the mouse. The mouse allows us to point in a direction and fire at any threats in order to make those threats go away. One is defensive, and the other is offensive. And so sometimes you can shoot incoming missiles, and that becomes defensive. Other times you can jump on enemies or drop things on enemies with your body, and so moving can become offensive, and these identities of control are negotiated throughout the game in really beautiful ways. And so it forces us to understand our relationship with space. Case in point, we have this boss fight against Maku, which is a very small, cramped arena embedded in bedrock. And so we need to find a way to manipulate our body through space and with the mouse in order to avoid the onslaught of this giant laser beam and all of the other things that the punches we have to roll with. And so this is the second boss of the game, and absolutely the coolest boss. Mako as a boss really does speak for herself in a lot of ways, but I think it's very important to note, just in the design of it all, that we have the long blonde hair that mimics and shows how like there's kind of a relation in some way to our red scarf, and so that's kind of cool. It's just a little nice detail. Both of which, the scarf and the hair, and many other parts, the wolf's tail and all sorts of things, are used to kind of relate positioning. Which kind of harkens back to the old Donkey Kong Jumpman, we've always had Mario with red overalls because of a design and positioning decision. Okay, so now she's gonna kind of toss grenades at us back and forth, and we're just gonna do our best to shoot them back at her without getting hit ourselves. So the cool thing about this idea of mobility as a force within this game, and as we're definitely seeing here, is that the way that the force of mobility acts against me as a player becomes one of the very few forces that empowers me and gives me a slim chance to survive. Uh-oh, what do we have here? it's the dreaded disco ball attack! You shoot at the disco ball? I can just shoot at the disco ball. The goal at this point is just to avoid falling in lava, and we have to jump on the rocks to do that, and it's just like, oh my goodness. Kind of trying to balance rotating between all my weapons, and there we go.